Unforgettable stories out of Western Jamaica from the scrapbooks of Adrian Freighter. In the early years of the Rastafarian movement, it was not unusual for agents of the states to regularly round up Rastafarian men, women and children and trim their locks. At that time, Rastafarians were seen as pariahs and were hated and scorned. In the early 1960s, Bakawal in West Kingston, which was heavily peopled by Rastafarians, was brutally demolished by the state, leaving the many Rastafarians homeless. More wickedness was heaped upon the Rastafarian community in 1963 when, on the instruction of the then Prime Minister Sir Alexander Bustamante, agents of the state were instructed to bring them in dead or alive. The rampant brutality, which started in St. James, subsequently spread to other western parishes, resulted in the death of a number of Rastafarians, while others were badly beaten and their locks were forcefully cut. Those Rastafarians who managed to elude the security forces fled to the hills, leaving their non-locks wearing families behind. As a youngster growing up, I also remember hearing the stories about what unfolded at Pinnacle in St. Catherine, where the first Rastafarian community was established by Leonard Howell, the founder of the Rastafarian movement. According to the stories, they were exposed to much brutality as the security forces would beat them up, take their positions, and cart them off to jail. The state finally began to soften its stance against the Rastafarian community when the world gradually began to accept Rastafarians and their message, which was primarily delivered through reggae music. That was the era in which singers like Bob Marley, Peter Tosh, Bunny Wailer, The Burning Spear, and Culture, which featured Joseph Hill, all came to the fore as recognized Rastafarian stars. As more and more Rastafarian singers became stars, the children of many affluent Jamaicans began to embrace the movement, to include wearing locks, much to the disappointment of their parents. The local educational system also came under pressure, with more and more Rastafarian students turning up at local schools, creating a headache for principals and school boards with no specific policies in place to deal with them. However, even as the state softened its stance against Rastafarians, there were still incidents popping up of police officers beating up Rastafarians, especially when they were caught with ganja in their possession. One place where the Rastafarian community seems to have very little rights was in the nation's prisons. Once a Rastafarian entered the prison system, it was routine for his locks to be cut. That was the case until the early 1990s, when a prominent Montego Bay-based Rastafarian, Bongo Manny, who was prisoned on ganja charges, took the state to court to save his locks and won, ending the era of the forceful trimming of Rastafarians in prison. Following the July 2022 incident in which 19-year-old Rastafarian nursing student Nzinga King was reportedly trimmed of her locks by a policewoman following her controversial arrest by the police, I spoke to Bongo Manny about the situation with young Nzinga and about his great act of defiance, which opened the gate for Rastafarians to keep their locks in prison. In this edition of Lest You Forget, I will be revisiting that story which was published on August 4, 2021 under the headline, Put Right to Natural Ear in Constitution. The story read as follows. Prominent Montego Bay-based religious elder Bongo Manny, the first Rastafarian to legally wear dreadlocks in the Jamaican prison system, is calling for the right to sport natural hair to be specifically inscribed in the Constitution to offer greater protection against state abuse. Bongo Manny's advocacy comes against the backdrop of a woman cop's alleged forcefully haircut of a Rastafarian teenager, Nzinga King, at the Fort Park police station in Clarendon on July 22nd. The incident is being investigated by the Inspectorate and Professional Standards Oversight Bureau and the Independent Commission of Investigations. In 1992, Bongo Manny launched a successful court challenge to prevent prison authorities from trimming his dreadlocks after he was convicted and incarcerated on ganja charges. Almost 30 years later, he is disappointed that there is still no clear policy to protect Rastafarians against overzealous state agents who have no respect for their religious and civil rights. "It is full time that this foolishness stop," said Bongo Manny, who is often seen with his ear proudly tossed over his shoulder like a towel. "It must be written in our constitution if it is not yet written, and it must be put up in every police station so the abusive police officers will know that the rights of Rastafarians must not be disturbed." Bongo Manny, one of the elders of the Pitford Nyabinghi Center in Granville, St. James, is urging King to seek legal redress through the court against the police. King has retained the service of attorney at law Isaac Buchanan, who has indicated an intention to sue the state. Here has remained key to concepts of identity in modern-day Jamaica, where Eurocentric cultural influence still holds sway in the grooming policy of schools and many workplaces. As one of the many elders who were at the forefront of the fight to get the government to apologize for the 1963 Carroll Gardens incident in Montego Bay, Bongo Manny believes that additional steps ought to be taken to protect the rights of Rastafarians. The Carroll Garden incident involved the slaying of several Rastafarians and police in a crackdown on civil protest. The ear of many Rastafarians were reportedly forcefully cut. It is good that the government has apologized for the atrocities of Carroll Gardens, but we also need to have the other atrocities taking place against Rastafarians to end, said Bongo Manny. We and this government need to sit down and revise or create a new constitutional provision to protect Rastafarians, because we have some jumping new police and some jumping new Rastas, and in the absence of clear laws, they are going to have problems. Like Bongo Manny, Queen Eye of the Montego Bay-based Rastafarian indigenous village thinks the right of Rastafarians should be documented and issued to all state agents, particularly the police and nurses. Queen Eye said the Fort Park incident has painful resonance for her because her children also wear dreadlocks. What took place was more than just a violation of the Empress's human rights. It could also affect her mental state, said Queen Eye. However, in looking at Bongo Manny's brave stance, which end the trimming of Rastafarians in prison, it's definitely one of those unforgettable stories out of Western Jamaica. Unforgettable stories out of Western Jamaica from the scrapbooks of Adrian Fruita. Before you go, please remember to subscribe.